All right, so the hardest part of doing a podcast is setting up the photo for the thumbnail, right?
Yeah, I don't
Because
know why, but it
I
is.
don't know, it's all this like weirdness of trying to get like the perfect angle.
Mhm.
And do you be serious? Do you be silly? Do you be, there's so many like different things that you can do
It's
for a
true.
thumbnail. And I think that's the hardest part of doing a podcast.
Yeah, I
Sitting here and
agree.
talking to you is a lot
It's
easier.
the easy part.
This is the easiest part. Yeah, drinking some chamomile tea and hearing the baby cry right at the beginning is perfectly fine.
Yeah,
Great.
totally. Well, he just wanted a little bit more room.
Oh, that's all right.
hmm
Okay. So we've been talking a lot lately about legacy and things that we will leave behind, not just to our children, but also to our children's children, children, and so on and so forth, like down the line. Because that is like an interesting uh, it's interesting that we as people we think about like the present. Obviously we think about right now, but and then we think about, okay, what are we going to give our children, but do we think about what our great grandchildren, future posterity,
hmm
like what will they think of us, what will they know of us? I mean, most of the things that my past ancestors, I don't know a lot about them. I mean,
hmm
we've done some digging on like ancestry.com and things of that nature, but I only have one relative that has passed on a journal that I have, which is a great uncle on my mom's side. And it's very special because
Yeah,
it's
it's
like
really
it's
sweet.
all of these remembrances, it's all of these various topics and things of his life that are just really, they're quaint, they're very country because he
hmm
lived down in southern Missouri and just had a very normal life as a farmer
hmm
and a very simple life, but he was also a deep person. So he towards the end of his life, he jotted down all of his thoughts about various instances and happenings, things in his life.
And just kind of what life was like, which I think sometimes you think like just the everyday what you're doing is not like very exciting,
Yeah.
but that becomes what you want to talk about or what's interesting later on. Even like when we watch home videos of our kids, it's like in the moment when you're recording something, you're like, oh, we need to be doing something fun or cool for this video to be interesting to us later. But really, it's like, I don't even care what we're doing. I'm like, oh my gosh, look at their face.
Yeah.
Oh, hear how they sounded. It's like just that snapshot of what life was like at that time is actually what becomes the most interesting
Yeah.
later. You don't have to try to make it interesting, just like
Yeah.
how life is.
Well,
Is
even like the
interesting.
little things that the kids do, if they say something that's really funny,
Oh yeah.
2 years, 3 years old, 4 years old, whatever, and then you jot it down or you put it in your note app on the
hmm
iPhone.
hmm
And then a few years goes by, and then you go, oh, hey, listen to this. So and so said this. And we're like, oh my gosh, we don't even remember the things that they said
Yeah.
just a few short years ago.
Yeah. Sometimes there are things they say like for a season over and over, and then you're like, oh, I barely remember that. You
Right.
think you're going to remember, but you don't.
Right. No, you don't.
No, you
You
don't.
really don't. Unless you chronicle it, it
Yeah.
really does get kind of. Look, memory is a weird thing. So we have these like little impressions of things in our life that we can kind of like go back to. We
hmm
can harken back to a moment of childhood, but we can't really see everything again. We can't
No.
feel everything. We think we can kind of do that, but really they're just like stilled images over
hmm
time. Unless we write it down, unless we kind of carry it out in such a way that it is disseminated either on a journal or perhaps maybe a video of some kind, we're not even going to remember it, right?
Yeah, that's so
And if you
true.
have 6 kids, you don't even remember what happened this morning, kind of thing,
Right.
right?
That's true. Yeah. So, do you write things down?
Not enough. Not enough. But I have been thinking now for the last few years. At some point, I want to write a journal, much like my great uncle's journal, that just documents and highlights portions of my life, portions of our life
hmm
that will be, chronicled for not just our children, but for those that come after
hmm
our descendants
Yeah.
down the road. But do I? No, not enough.
Yeah.
Do you?
No, not near enough. I mean, I do sometimes, but what we were reading the other night, um, a book by Corey Ten Boom, where she does have a large family history of things people left behind. And one of the things she shares in this book is her mother's journal. And she says that her mother had gaps of like, it'd be a year or 2 years and there'd be one entry. I'm like, oh, that's how I journal.
Yeah.
I used to journal very consistently, but then it'll be like the last time I journaled before this one was our child before, and she's 2. I'm like, oh, it's been a while.
Yeah.
Or maybe she was like 3 months old. That was the last time I journaled. So not enough, but
you
I
do
love
it.
to look back.
But you do it,
yeah, and you can see so much of the Lord's faithfulness when you do that. Yeah, I'd like to journal more. I think it's a discipline as much as anything else. We think we don't have time, but like we have time to do other things. So
if we have time to scroll as much as we all scroll, and that's like everybody, we have time to do a lot of things that we're not doing.
For 5 minutes and it'd be better than not. But yeah, and sometimes we can verbally retell things. Like my mom is the keeper of our family history.
Yeah.
She has told me some of the same stories since I was a little girl about my grandmothers or my great grandmothers, a lot of whom were believers, and they're awesome stories. But like, I still get them hazy. I'm like, tell me that one again. Now, was that Grandma Essie or was that Grandma Green? Was that like I get confused as to who they were because I only knew them very briefly when I was very young and they were very old. It's kind of hard to imagine when you're a kid and you're like with your great grandma that she was ever young and like did things out in the world and lived like any life other than being a cute little old lady. So
you've always had wrinkles, Grandma.
Right. You've always looked like that. So but I love to hear it, and I want to always remember those stories, and I want to pass them down to our kids.
Yeah.
We're as people, we love stories.
Clearly.
I
mean,
so much
that's
of entertainment is story.
That's what many movies are. That's what movies are. They're really just stories. Stories that can be true or fabricated, but they are stories, and we love stories. Yeah, I mean, I think that's what makes even the journal that I have in my possession so powerful, is that out of both sides of my family, there's one artifact, one journal that has been kept, a record of someone's life and livelihood. And to be able to have that is actually very precious.
Yeah, it is. And the excerpt you read tonight, you read it to the boys and they wanted you to read it to me. It was actually about your uncle's great uncle, great uncle, whatever he was.
Yeah.
Some sort of uncle. I don't know how many greats were in there. It was about his conversion.
Yes.
He spent most of his life not as a believer.
Yeah.
And his wife prayed for him for how many years did he say?
40 years.
For 40 years. She prayed for him to know the Lord. She prayed for his safety. And it wasn't until like right before she died that he converted. But it's like, it's really powerful. It's really, really sweet and cool. And yeah, a mark of God's faithfulness to read that. And he even says in the beginning, he dedicates it to his descendants and future descendants.
Yeah, actually, I was actually going to read just the first 2 lines of his opening. He says, "I'm writing this journal for my children and grandchildren, that they may know the history of their family and of this country, the way it was as I remember and as was told to me by my parents and grandparents. I pray that each of you will stand proud, as did your ancestors before you." And that's the kind of like legacy that we should want to endow to future posterity. You know, like the people that are 100 years removed from us, they might know our names someday, but they probably won't unless we record, unless we actually have something written down that is then passed down. And, you know, I've read this journal since I was about 12 years old, something like that. And so to read the anecdotes, to read the stories, it's like, wow, this is a piece of history that actually means something to me because it's within my family. So I think of that too. And maybe not everyone would find that so appealing. And maybe there's a nostalgic nature that I have, that less people have in the world, whatever. Yeah. But the point is, someday, 100 years from now, there will be another 12-year-old boy who is part of my gene pool or whatever, down the line, down the descendant line, who will read that and be like, hey, I know something about my great-great-great-grandfather or whatever. And this is what he did. This was the time in which he lived. Some of the things that he chronicles are like the time period of the wilderness, the country, and what happened when man came and knocked down certain parts of the forests and how certain animals went extinct. And so he talks about like the rivers and how they were once full of fish, and then man did certain things in the rivers, and then the fish, weren't as plentiful anymore. Our time period, especially our generation, like we have gone through the time of no smartphones.
Yeah.
The internet wasn't a thing when we were very small children. True. At all. My dad had a car phone.
That was big one. My grandma had one.
Big bag thing.
Yeah.
That was
so cool.
And he never, but he never even really used it. It was just.
Oh, my grandma would call to figure out showtimes. But it was like, let's go get in the phone and call the movie theater for showtimes, because that's what you used to have to do. You had to call and you had to wait. They would tell you about the different time and the different movies that were playing. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. My parents would write down the times.
Or you circle it in the newspaper.
You'd circle it in the newspaper. Yeah. Right. But see, we lived through the transition.
We did.
Mm-hmm. So if we were to chronicle, at one time when we were children, this was the way the world was.
Yeah.
It was the time before email. It was the time before YouTube and social media and smartphones and the ubiquity of all things internet.
Mm-hmm.
We lived through that transitionary period of time. To chronicle that 100 years from now, it may seem trite to us today, but it won't be 100 years from now. People will be like, wow, they actually lived without it?
Right.
And who knows what they'll have 100 years from now.
Well, that's true. But, okay, with all of that has been invented and advanced, there's social media. There are ways that we are chronicling our lives. It's different than, the written word sometimes. Well, sometimes on social media, there's the written word. We take a lot more photographs than previous generations have. Do you think there's still a need for, your inner thoughts and writing those down for future posterity? Or couldn't they, your great-great-great-grandkids, maybe they can look you up on Facebook years from now and be like, oh, that was my, there's more of an online trail.
Right.
But this is still an important thing. You're getting different content, I guess. This is more, if you write it down, it's more curated with a specific thing, and maybe you're going to share things that are different.
I think it will be less interesting 100 years from now or whenever for somebody to see what I ate at a restaurant. As the great.
Do you post that kind of thing?
I don't. No. Yeah, I may
shouldn't.
Post some other silly things, but I don't post what I eat at a restaurant. No. I think I never got that one. In fact, that's one I've never done. I've posted if we're at a cool restaurant, perhaps I'll say checked in, which I don't even check in anymore.
There are things that are fads.
There's things that are fads. I don't do that. The great comedian Dennis Miller said, "Never have lives less lived been more chronicled."
You got to think about that one for a minute, but it's really clever.
It's hilarious.
Yeah, we chronicle everything.
We chronicle everything with pictures. We do.
We do.
But if we were to chronicle with the written word, pictures are wonderful, but the written word gets into the psyche of the human mind, and it bears into it the soul of the individual. I came up with that just now.
That's pretty good. Yeah, well, I do think, too, I don't know. Well, like I said, story. When you're reading something, it's to the point. Whereas, I don't even know what it'll be 100 years to scroll through somebody's social media if you can even access it anymore, or if it's buried in archives. But you're still just seeing you're seeing one type of highlighted thing. You're not seeing somebody's continuous thoughts or their memories of certain things. Most people don't use their Facebook like a ongoing journal of what's happening and what the Lord's done, and you're not summarizing portions of your life in the same way you would if you're thinking about writing.
Yeah, and we don't have to go down this rabbit trail, but I don't think neither would it be maybe appropriate to use Facebook as a Dear Diary journal. And I don't even think, and when it comes to the journal that I have from my uncle, it's not a Dear Diary kind of thing.
No, it's
not. It
not.
Really is just instances of his life
memories
that stood out and memories that,
mm-hmm.
Because it's been written down, there's understanding all these years later of, what did this guy go through? What were his jobs? What were his ailments? What were his anxieties? What were his fears? What were his joys? All of these things that you go, there's a human connection,
mm-hmm.
even lapsing and passing all of the time that has gone on in between, that you can read the written word and go, oh my gosh, this is so applicable to right now, to even the moments of fear or thoughts or whatever that we're having in our
mm-hmm.
own life.
Well, along with that, letters are another thing that's kind of a lost art.
Yeah.
If I think about a lot of like the founding fathers, they have like books. We have lots of their thoughts because they wrote letters, and those have been collected and published. John Newton, he wrote some incredible letters. You get like insight into what he's thinking about, what he's praying for. Like even some of this Corrie ten Boom book is that we've been reading through is letters that like her mother and her father wrote back and forth. You're getting insights into their heart that are private, but that are very telling about how they think and what they need. So we don't write letters like that anymore.
Pretty much, no.
Yeah.
No, we don't.
That's sad.
Yeah, it's sad. It's sad. Yeah, letters are a powerful instrument. For sure. Yeah. Yeah, wasn't there a letter or something that you had seen recently in the Corey book?
Yeah, there's a quote, because man, they lived through some hard times, and they had
during World War II.
Yeah, and they had.
And this is even before that. This is like in the 18. Is this letter from like
1887?
Okay.
The letter before it, anyway. They had some financial stuff. His first wife, she ends up dying, so she's got poor health for a long time. They've had several babies perish. It's just because whatever the mom had, do you remember what it was?
Pneumonia, I thought.
No, it was something that was easily typhoid, or I don't know. It was something that was easily passed on to an infant.
Okay.
They also had small living quarters, but they just seem like a lot of really heavy things. And yeah. So Corey's father writes to his wife, I hope the Lord will bring days and years of prosperity to us. Still, we have nothing to complain about, for his loving kindness to us is immeasurable. My prayer for you, my dear wife, is that the Lord may bless the medicine you take and complete your healing. How we shall thank him if you prove to be healed. But whatever the outcome, we shall thank him, because all his doings are pure love. The important thing is that we live pure lives through his grace, that we grow pure, and that we come closer and closer to God. We must desire this with our whole hearts, for it is his will. I greatly long to have you home again and near to my heart, but if you need it, get more rest and stay until you are stronger. But you know how greatly I long for you. I kiss and embrace you with all my heart, and so do little Betsy and little Willem. The line that really stands out to me is, but whatever the outcome, we shall thank him, because all his doings are pure love. This is something we kind of reflect on too, and she does not get healed on this side.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times in the moment, we can't see what God's doing, or we're maybe asking him to answer a prayer in this way, and then he answers it in that way. And there can be seasons where it's confusing, but I feel like especially if you journal and remember and recount, then oftentimes when you're kind of through that patch where you're not certain, or God does something different or answers your prayer in a different way, you can later see, oh my gosh, I'm so glad he did it like this and not the way I was asking. He sees a bigger picture. Yeah. So to know even in hard things, all his doings are pure love. I love that. It's a great understanding of his sovereignty, even in moments where it's like, how can that be his pure love? But we trust that it is, because he tells us in his word. He's got precious promises to us that whatever he does is for our good and not for our harm, even if it feels like it in the moment. And these are people who lived through some very, very difficult times. So coming from him to say that is very, very
And they could have spoken those same words to one another, but they never would have gotten passed down, chronicled in the same way.
That's true. I wouldn't be reading them.
We wouldn't be reading them. And, there's something to be said for just the spoken word, of course, and to be able to speak truth and all of that. But to write it down, it has the opportunity to live and outlive the person.
Yeah, and even if it's just within your own family, because obviously for years and years it was, that's still very awesome and powerful. I think to know the bigger story of where you are in the place in the world, oh, these are the people I came from. This is God's providence, that these were my parents, my grandparents. Yeah, it's cool to know.
Do you have journals? You have obviously memories from your mom telling you stories and such, but do you have any type of thing that's been passed down to you?
Nobody's written that kind of thing. We did find when my grandma passed away, that she had journaled for a brief period of her life, and some of that was really sweet to read. Or like even it's not a journal, but she left a vase to me, and she wrote on a little Post-it note the way that the vase reminded her of me, because it was like flowers on it, and it was I took a picture of it so I would never lose it in case I lose it. See, a picture, because that's how we chronicle things. But just like the way that it reminded her, these flowers, that they were, can't remember what she said about them, but that they reminded her of me. It was precious to have her handwriting and to see, like, she was thinking about me and that those reminded her of me. That was just sweet to know.
Yeah.
And people's handwriting. That's another thing.
People's handwriting.
If you don't, which I guess some people will type out, like your uncle's journal is typed, which is still cool, but people's handwriting is very cool.
Yeah, if you can read it, and as long as like not Dr. Scrawl, but yes, absolutely.
Well, some people have very unique handwriting, but you can still read it. Like my dad has very unique handwriting, but once you get the hang of his writing, then you can read it.
True. I don't think are we ever gonna get back to the days where, remember, like you can see something like the founding fathers and how they wrote.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
That penmanship, oh man. There's actually, sorry, rabbit trail. There's this group out in Pennsylvania that get together. They're like a part of this whole like fountain pen club. It's actually a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
I forget what they're called. But they get together and they like swap pens and they sell pens, and it's this whole thing.
Fountain pens, like normal ink?
Yeah, fountain pens, quills, all this stuff. And they like learn various, calligraphy? Mm-hmm. So they do the calligraphy and the handwriting, the way that the founders, that era of time, practice it. So that's, I've seen some of that stuff. That's pretty nifty.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
There's one girl I went to grade school with that had like the most perfect. All her letters were like the same. Like every Q you saw was the same. Every P, like her. Yeah. I tried to get her to like teach me how she did it. She held her pen different than me, and I couldn't do it that way. But yeah, she had perfect handwriting. I knew a guy growing up where his handwriting, it was good handwriting, but for whatever reason, all of his letters were capitalized. So he would write me. Some people do that. He would write me notes and things like that for various reasons, and so when I got his note, he'd be like, every letter was capitalized. It looked cool, but I'm like, what are you doing? Like, what is this? Like, you capitalize every letter. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I've had friends do that. Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah. On X, I don't understand certain people that are getting rid of punctuation altogether and capitalization completely. So they'll just like not use it. I think it's like some way of fighting against the system. Something bizarre, something weird. Yeah, Tim Pool does this all the time. Do you even know Tim Pool? That name's familiar, but I Beanie Boy, the beanie hat guy. He's huge on X. Sometime follow or read some of his posts, because it looks as if a person who didn't pass, I don't know, 4th grade English or something is tweeting. And and it's not because he probably doesn't know. I just think he and other people like him are against the grain of punctuation and such. I don't know. It's just an interesting way of breaking down human language and not abiding by just the given rules and format. But sounds kind of lazy. Again, that's a tangent. Another tangent to talk about, really, is, so do we want to leave a legacy or not? Oh. Because if you go back in Christian music world, what was it, Norman? What was the girl's name? What was the gal's name who was, I want to leave a legacy? How will they remember me? What was her name? That wasn't Point of Grace. No, that wasn't Point of Grace. I think her last name was Norman. Maybe somebody can tell us. I don't know. She sings something else. Nicole Nordman. Okay. Almost Norman, but not Nordman. Isn't Nordman also a clothing company? Nordman? That's Nordstrom. Nordstrom. And then there's the Nordstrom pipeline. Oh, you are all over the place. That's a tangent. That's some okay, so nifty. Okay. Go back to Nicole. Okay, so Nicole Nordman. And I don't even, whatever. Okay. She wrote that song that was all big and popular in the Christian world. It was all about leaving a legacy. Yeah, it was a nice tune. It was a nice thing. But then, fast forward like, I don't know,
20 years later, I don't know my Christian music anymore. The Casting Crowns came around and they're like, I don't want to leave a legacy, which was like a super popular song. And the first time I heard it, I'm like, where were they 20 years ago when Nicole Nordeman was singing She Wants to Leave a Legacy? So all that silliness to ask a more serious question, do we want to leave a legacy or not?
Of course we do.
Do we want to be like Casting Crowns and just say only Jesus to everything?
Yeah, but how only Jesus? Because how you live, which is your legacy,
yes,
how you lived shows only Jesus or only myself or only, like, it's how we live. That's the legacy that we pass on.
Yeah.
So if it reflects and points to our Savior, then we have lived well. And if it doesn't,
perhaps that's what they're trying to say. I will give them the benefit of the doubt because I don't know what they're saying.
Funny that
but here's the problem.
Line is
here's the problem. We live in a Christian culture world, or at least we have, unfortunately, for the last 50 years, maybe 100 years, that essentially downgrades the physical nature of our lives and upgrades the spiritual, as if there's the demarcation. There's this sense of like the physical is bad, even though Christ came in human flesh and then resurrected in human flesh. And then there's like this uplifting of just what we call the spiritual. When in reality, God cares about both.
What's an example of that?
That song. I feel like the song I Don't Want to Leave a Legacy is saying, hey, the physical world doesn't matter. Only Jesus matters. And it's like, well, yes, Jesus obviously matters and he matters the most. Okay, fine. Agreed. But then there's like the element of, wait a minute. No, you're missing something because, hey, I want 1,000 years from now, I want our great, whatever, grandchildren to be like my grandparents, however many generations up they are. They passed down things. They left a legacy. I don't think we'll be able to leave necessarily wealth directly to them, hopefully to our children's children at least. But there's an element of, I want my name to be remembered by my own blood. But not
as a faithful Christ follower.
Well, yes, of course, that first and foremost. But then also as who was I while I was here? What did I do while I lived? What was the world like what can I pass as a storyteller to those little listeners someday, however long from now? Well, I mean, within every subsequent generation from us. I want our generation to be like, that was my grandfather, that was my grandmother, that's what they did, that was their fears, their trials, their tribulations, and also their joys and happiness in life and everything. I want them to be able to have a vision and understanding of the legacy that we live. And so, to me, there's certain things in the Christian world that's like, nope, we don't touch that because it's earthly. Well, of course it is. We're on the earth and we pray for the kingdom to come to the earth. Right? Okay.
Okay. How cool would it be? It just made me think of this while you were talking. How cool would it be if somebody handed you a book and they were like, here, this is from 40 generations of the people that have come before you. Like a mom and a dad wrote their story. They passed it to their children. That one of their children wrote their story. They passed it down. Like if you had like all these generations that were your line that in one book compilated.
That would be amazing.
It'd be so amazing. In some sense, it's kind of like the history of God's people is in the Bible that way, which is really cool. And we're told over and over, remember. And how do they remember? Because it's written down.
Because it's written
down. And they
down.
also recount verbally a lot because there were times that not everyone wrote things. But I'm amazed at how often in the Bible there's remember that, and they tell the story over and over again about the children of Israel and going out of Egypt and all that happened and the way God delivered them over and over and over. Remember, it's like in the Psalms, it's in Genesis, it's requoted several times. There's like all these places, even the New Testament, they recap the history of the children of Israel because it's important where you came from. It's important to see God's faithfulness even before you came into the world, into being.
Yeah. It's very important.
Very.
Yeah. How'd you like that rabbit trail?
That was a lot of rabbit trailing.
Yeah, that was fun. That was fun. Cool. Any further thoughts, recommendations?
I recommend
Should
that
we talk about the table again?
I recommend that you start writing.
Oh yes, absolutely. Duh,
You,
yeah.
personally. I mean, if you guys
Absolutely.
want to write
I
too,
mean,
that's
yeah.
awesome.
If people, if those that listen, whatever yeah, exactly. Hopefully, it spurs other people to go, oh, hey, maybe that's a good idea. But yeah, I know personally, this is what we're talking about lately.
Yeah.
This is just private conversation of what we've been throwing around now, off and on for weeks. Of wait a minute, like we need to be chronicling. We need to be writing down certain things as we have time with our, abode of 6 children and our busy life and hectic schedules and such.
True.
Yeah.
Okay, one other thought is actually from the Corey ten Boom book again, because we just read this tonight. You read it to me. It was about, okay, so Corey's father's name is Casper. They lived through World War II.
Yep.
Okay. And they were from Holland. They were Dutch, but they harbored Jews through the Holocaust and faced persecution. Casper ten Boom actually died in a concentration camp. So his father's name was Willem. Willem wrote, you do it better than me. You tell it. What did Willem write about burdens?
That our burdens are never too heavy, that the Lord won't give us too much, that he'll take care of the burdens when we have them, and that when death comes, he'll be there alongside us to help
give
us.
us the strength in the moment.
That's it.
Yeah, like you can't. I think someone was saying they were afraid of death, and he's like, you can't. The Lord will give you the grace you need in the moment of death. Like it's not something you get beforehand. It's right when you need it. It's like a suitcase. You don't pack it way before. You pack it right when you need it.
Yeah.
The Lord will give you the grace for it. So that was a story that we know from one of Corey's other books, that her father told her something very similar about burdens in a suitcase, but it actually came from her grandfather to her father. He wrote it, and the father knew it, and the father verbally retold it to Corey, who then wrote it so that we knew it. But anyway, it's verbal and it's written, passed down truth that a grandfather gives to a son who gives to a daughter.
All that to prove my point.
Exactly.
Is that Willem left a legacy.
He did.
How will they... Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So, yeah. Christian music needs to learn to get it together and write better songs.
Yeah.
That's another tangent. I won't go down that one right now, but I already did. But there's a lot more to say about that.
There is.
So, yeah, anything else? Is that good?
That's good. Unless you have any other thoughts.
I always have a lot of thoughts. But that's all for now. So if you would, please like, share, and subscribe. And thank you very much.